Welcome to the Future Proof Leader podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jessica Raypatch, co-founder of Twin Legacy Solutions, a company specializing in AI and leadership solutions that help organizations build client outreach, stronger teams, and future-ready leaders. Today, I'm very excited to welcome James Rosebush, CEO of Growth Strategy, who brings a powerful perspective as we explore his career journey and gain his insights on today's most relevant topics. James, we're honored to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining our podcast.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it.
Great. I'd love to kick things off with you just telling us a little bit about who you are, where have you been, what do you do?
Well, now that would be a very boring story, but I'll help you a little bit. We were talking about, before we started today, my years in the Reagan White House, which is certainly a huge and very interesting and valuable experience for me. At that time, I was running a corporate foundation, and I got a call from the Reagan team right after President Reagan was elected, before he took office. And they said, we'd like you to come work in the White House. And I said, believe it or not, I said, oh, I think I'm happy in my position now. I think, but fortunately I slept on it. And I guess in the shower the next morning, something was saying, no, 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 you got to call these people back. So I did call them back and I said, is that job still open that you very kindly called me about yesterday? And they said, sure. And I said, well, what job do you want me to have? And they said, pick a job, pick a job. And as I'd never heard of anything like that. But what they really meant was any president of the United States has an opportunity to commission up to 2,000 officers in his retinue. So I looked at that book and I chose the position of representing the president to the business community. I thought that was the most likely thing for me to do in the White House. So I started in that, but within, I guess, probably 2 months after that, and I didn't know this was coming, but a part of the president's, you might say, strategic plan for the Reagan White House was to create the first impact office at the White House, which basically meant at that time, and people weren't even really talking about impact at that time so much as what we were doing was to bring in the public sector and the private sector together to improve public sector programs. So, for example, public housing was being, it was very poor quality. People who needed to be in public housing were not getting the kind of quality and sustainability that was needed. So I brought in developers from the business side. And I said, can you make sustainable housing for people that need housing? Yes, we can do that. And so that started Section 8 housing. Same thing with education. We created, as you know now, we've created schools that can be basically run between the public sector and the private sector. So that was a wonderful way to do that. And public transportation, we did the same thing. So it turned out to be the president's favorite domestic policy program. And because of that, I worked directly with him, and it gave me not only an opportunity to do some extraordinary things, because Great Britain, France, and Italy both adopted our strategy. So I had an opportunity to work with them as well. So I had an opportunity to work at number 10 Downing Street to help them create this impact strategy and deploy it. So I did that for a year, working directly for the president, and then I was asked to be a chief of staff in the White House. So I didn't really understand what that would mean, but I quickly had to learn. And it put me into basically what's called the presidential package. So wherever the president was going, I was going as well. That was really the wonderful part of it. And I learned a tremendous amount about negotiating with foreign countries where we were traveling on state visits. That was really marvelous. But mainly, it gave me an opportunity to really understand President Reagan and who he was and why he did the things he did and the thought process that he had. And that was tremendously valuable to me. And serving as a chief of staff to Nancy Reagan, my job was really to turn her around from being one of the most least successful first lady to being among the top 10. And that we were able to do by really every day being on the road talking about drug abuse, which is a big cause for her, And she was very committed to that. And people could just be able to see that she was a real person. And that really turned the tide. I mean, I have a couple of stories I'd be happy to tell you about that because they were very meaningful. But I don't want to just focus on my White House years. I want to focus on what you're interested in.
Yeah. Amazing. So, wow, what a background. So, all of this laid the foundation for your company. Now, growth strategy, you focus on leadership. Tell me more about what exactly your company is focusing
Sure.
on right
So
now.
it's typical for people to leave, and I was also nominated as a U.S. ambassador, so I have that credential as well. So a lot of people leave the White House going into lobbying, or they're already lawyers as they come into the White House. They're lawyers. So you see most people who work in top level positions like that do those kinds of things. Well, I had no interest in lobbying. Was not a lawyer. And I thought probably I would go back into running a family office, which was something that I had done actually starting at age 18. And I'd be happy with that. There weren't as many opportunities as I had 5 different companies that came to me and asked me if I would be an advisor to their company. So I had to create a company, and I asked myself, my dad was a tremendous influence on me in terms of business and other things because he had 3 things that were very important to me. He was a General Motors executive, and he was constantly thinking of new ideas for how to build and make General Motors even more successful. Number 2, he was a musician. He wanted me to be a musician, which I became. And number 3, he was a Dale Carnegie speech instructor. So this is something that I do as well. None of us, I think, probably think we're just going to be just like our parents, but along that score, those were 3 patterns that he was very useful in giving me. So one of the things he said to me when I was probably 12, 15, 14 years old, and I was mowing people's lawns to make money, he said, always call your company, give it the name of what it does so that people know automatically. So I thought in starting this company after the White House, I would call it growth strategy because I love to grow things and I like to do it strategically. Now, at the time, I remember people who worked for the major consulting firms, they sort of laughed at me in a way, not outwardly, but why did you name your company growth strategy? And because they were very serious in other ways. But I noticed within 3 years of my launching my company with this name, they started, they weren't copying me, but they started to call their practice growth strategy as well. So I think anyone is interested, I mean, everyone's interested in growing their businesses. And the best way to do it is strategically through creating a strategy that you can create and live by and work by. And so that's why I called it growth strategy.
I love it. I found you. So, that is very, very cool. I'm so excited to get your perspective on just some of the things people are talking about in the industry today. The first one, what's the biggest leadership challenge that businesses face today in an environment that's shaped by such rapid technology change?
Well, I've written 3 books, and maybe
Wow.
you've read some of them. True Reagan. Another one is Winning Your Audience, about how to speak as a leader. I have to tell you, I'm working on my 4th book, but it's the most difficult book to read, and you know why?
Why?
It's about leadership. But
Mm.
I've had to turn the topic really from leadership to the disappearance of leadership. So the leadership as we have known it, and it's gone, up and down basically. But when you think about mostly people reflect on individuals that they think have been successful for certain purposes, and they want to, especially young people who are going into markets or starting companies or running them, they like to emulate people that have been successful. And why? Today, it isn't quite as easy as it was in the past, where you could take people who had achieved a lot, but also had and represented qualities that they wanted to emulate, not just what they were doing in terms of creating new products, which is certainly important, but how they treated their employees, how they built their company, their honesty, their integrity, their presence, and how they would encourage people who are working for them. These sort of qualities that this is the way we've thought of leadership in the past. Jessica, as I mentioned, it's really difficult to write a book about, as I said, about leadership now, the disappearance of leadership, because it isn't as easy to select individuals. Certainly, you can take plenty of very highly successful people in really in any industry. The digital industry is obviously highly thought of, and it's got a lot going for it, a lot of energy, so that we know who has done the things that have really been transformative. Yes, it's one thing to be transformative, it's another thing to be a leader. So we have a lot of people who have transformed industries, no question. In fact, we need more people to transform industries. Automobile industry would be one in particular that we could think about. There have been a lot of attempts in this. So this is where I think we really need to be able to define what leadership is so that leadership can be practiced by the coming generations.
Right. And to that point, the coming generations, they really are advanced when it comes down to technology. I think that they are kind of much ahead of the executives and the high directors from what I talked to many different company leaders. Um, what would you recommend to these high level leaders that are getting a wave of the new generation coming in who is very tech savvy? How do they lead from the front still with that without that edge? What can they do? Leadership development, like, do you have any strategy for that?
Well, I think they understand that they have to grab these people who are uniquely talented at their teenage years in creating all new kinds of digital products. And you see it all over the place. You see it's basically teenagers that are I have grandsons that build their own laptops. They build their own, they're doing things that are very interesting to the industry, the digital industry. And so it's unique, really, in this way that you have opportunity for people at a very young age to be created in the sciences, to be creative in the sciences. So they're really bringing a lot of not only new products and new ideas. And we should always be focused on new ideas. This is critically important. It's ideas that really fuel our economy. And when we stop having ideas is when we stop having success. And I think there's much more of that now than, in the United States, for example, in my father's generation, there was large industry where basically people ran it or worked in it or did both. Today, it's basically you start your own company and you create a new product and you get the money, you get the investors involved in it and they make money from it. So it's a whole different process of building wealth and building products that are useful to people to have. And it's a whole different outlook in terms of the way the Western economy is running now from the way it did at one time. So I think it's really, and there are a lot of other things that you see that are parallel with this. For example, one of the things that has been most interesting to me is to see the advance away from what used to be called the Western Alliance, which was the United States and Europe. Now that's really migrating away from and moving into, most importantly, to the Middle East. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of interesting things going on in the Middle East that the American industry is very interested in and is working with in a faster, more potent way than European countries. So it's very interesting to see this where there's tremendous amount of opportunity, but we have to be also at the same time very careful. I think one of my friends has started an independent school, and he feels very strongly that we need to educate young people at an early level about as much about culture and art and history as we do the digital side. And I think that's tremendously important, but that's just another element of it.
Oh, I actually have young kids myself, and I'm in New York. I definitely think that the push for cultural diversity well-rounded students is really being pushed. I would say, I mean, they're all in elementary school, and I'm envious of all the things that they're learning. The curriculum has really expanded on that side, and I think that's great. You mentioned ideas and how it's so important. Now, today we're dealing with a new element when it comes to ideas. So we have AI. Some people are calling it the AI generation. We're at a point where it's pretty new. Not only is it new, there's just a million AI systems being built. Some companies are using it, they're implementing it, and some are kind of, no, it's not for me. I don't trust it yet. I'm going to back away. Now we're starting to see the companies that have been implementing some kind of AI in their company strategy kind of advancing further along than those that aren't. What do you think? What's your opinion on AI in the industry when it comes to ideas, leveraging AI? What can you tell to those companies that are using it versus those who are not using it? What would be your prediction?
Well, I would say not using it is not an option. So
I
you better
agree.
get with it. Okay. So the thing is that I know that some, and I know myself, I was very, a little bit reticent to use AI because I felt that it was going to control me in the wrong way. And I felt that, the president that I was, this is very important. The president that I worked for, Ronald Reagan, always used this phrase, and he taught me this: what is really going on? What is really going on? He would read his briefing books. He would, so this is parallel with AI. I'm going to tell you right now. So you have AI telling you what is real. You
Mhm.
have to be very cautious at the same time and ask yourself what is really going on. Is what AI is telling me. Now, if you, did I just mention to you Dan Brown's new book?
Yes, Dan Brown,
Yes,
yes.
very, 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 very important to read that book because it will tell you basically also, it's a cautionary tale about AI, basically. Who is controlling you? So let's go back to Reagan for a minute. Why did he always say and ask this question, what is really going on? Because what he was being told in his briefing books by advisors, and not to say that there was anything wrong with any of those, but he wanted to know himself what is really going on. And that's what made him a great president. You have to have AI and you have to have this, be able to answer this question: what is really going on? You have to protect yourself as much as you do use it. Okay. So I use it all the time. I use Claude a lot, for example. I use Claude to get information. I also ask Claude for the opinions about things, but I'm very careful to make sure that this is something, a direction that I want to go in, or it's a direction that I believe in, because I think consciousness now, this is a part of the Dan Brown book. Consciousness is what we're really migrating toward. Consciousness. Yes, we can have material textbooks, material digital textbooks, so to speak, which is basically what AI is. And that can advance our ability to grow our companies, to create new, all different kinds of things, and to push us in a certain direction. It's also important to live according to your own conscience. We have to be able to protect conscience and consciousness. AI can move us in the right direction, but it can also be used to manipulate people in certain directions. So I think it's something that is absolutely, I use it, I believe in it, I support it, I tell people to use it. But at the same time, I think you're a human being. You have to be, you're brought here on the earth to basically provide what you consider views that are valid to you, uniquely to you. You are an individual. You have consciousness, and you have to listen to what that is telling you. That is more important than AI.
I think we definitely consciousness is the perfect way to put it. I crave the human element everywhere I go, and I feel like people need to understand that when they need to make sure they really understand Should they use AI? Absolutely. I think you're right. There's no you can't not use it. And then you have people coming in, the younger generation, all the people that are looking for the jobs, they leverage AI. But you really need to understand, what am I using it for? Do I need to use it for X, Y, and Z, or can I use it for A through C and keep my strategy teams on point? So I couldn't agree more there. In case the viewers are wondering, because I don't know if we mentioned the title, but the title of that Dan Brown book is called Digital Warfare, that James is referring to, in case anybody had any questions on that. So, um, wow. Well, thanks again for being a guest today, James. This was awesome. Before we turn in, can you tell the followers or anyone watching right now, how can people find your company and exactly what can you offer them? Is there a website, or tell us a little
Yes,
bit more?
sure. Growthstrategy.us is the website. Everything is on there. List of clients. You can listen to me. I give a lot of speeches, so very often on LinkedIn, they're posted there as well. I have a huge number of followers on LinkedIn, which I'm very grateful for. I did have a column on Business Insider, so there are columns there. I also had a column on Leaders Magazine, which was a whole lot of fun. So I'm happy to, as I say, I work with family offices, I work with companies and nonprofits, and then I'm a coach on speaking and on leadership. And one of my most rewarding things, I have to say, is helping people learn how to communicate the way Reagan did. I get people who will stop me on the sidewalk and say, I know that you worked for the great President Ronald. And a lot of these people weren't even born when Reagan was in the White House. And we know that Reagan is called a great communicator. Could you make me another Ronald Reagan so I could be a great communicator? If you can't communicate humanly, and a lot of people can't, it is an inhibitor to your success. And it's very rewarding to me. I've had uh, serial billionaires. I've had people who are successful in a lot of different fields, and those that are just climbing up learn more about how they can communicate more effectively, and that's very rewarding. But anyway, those are my three silos. Happy to just talk to anyone who's interested in working with me.
And you mentioned you have a couple books out there. Are those, where can they find your books, on Amazon or?
Yes, you can get, I mean, they're published from a publisher, but you can get them on Amazon. One is called True Reagan. This is a book that explains who Reagan really was from the inside out. I think it's a wonderful book. I have to say this one little quip about it. When I was doing and these are also audiobooks. So when I was doing the recording for that book, at the very last day, it takes a week to, you've probably done this because you've had books yourself, but when you're doing recording books, it takes a long time because they have to stop and start, if you cough or whatever. So anyway, it's an interesting experience, but at the very last minute, of the last day and the last word, I heard, so I was in the booth and the producer was in another booth, and I heard someone crying. And I thought, oh gosh, what did I do wrong? And so I said on my mic, I said to the producer, I said, is that you? And he said, yes. And I said, are you okay? Are you okay? And he said, this is one of the most moving things that's ever happened in my life. He said, I'm fine, but you have to understand what you did. And I said, oh no, I was probably made a big mistake. And he said, you made me love Ronald Reagan. I
Oh,
was taught by my parents to hate Ronald Reagan.
oh no. Okay.
I'll never forget that as long as I live. That just gave him this sense. So that's really what's in the book. It isn't a book that tries to make people like Reagan, but it explains Reagan. And then the third book is called Winning Your Audience. That's all about how you can use Reagan's speaking tactics to be a great speaker. And the first book is called First Lady Public Wife. It's about the job of being First Lady in the White House.
That's amazing. Well, you're an impeccable speaker. I will say I could listen to you all day. James, thank you so much again for being our guest today on our podcast. Your experience, your honesty, you've added so much value to our conversation today. It's been a pleasure. You have had such a successful life and continue to have a successful life. I'm sure anybody would be honored to work with you. I hope people reach out because that's quite an opportunity. And to our listeners, thank you so much for spending your time with us today on the Future Proof Leader. We appreciate you being part of this community, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Bye, James.
Bye.